Hello, welcome in right now here into Caden's Weather Center. Today we are paying attention to tropical cyclone or potential tropical cyclone 4 here. A lot to be paying attention to as we go on throughout the night here. What models could we see change? What will the National Hurricane Center do, as we're already starting to see some of the outer bands starting to approach southern Florida here. So a little bit to be paying attention to. Very big difference than this morning, so we'll have to keep an eye out on that. So let's take a look right now as we head in to the satellite. Let's take a look here at the satellite. We're paying attention to the satellite picture right now. It really has starting to look a lot more organized here. A lot of convection starting to blow up over here just south here of Florida. We have a little bit of convection also just over western Cuba, but also down here where we have some pretty big storms starting to blow up from this storm. So a little bit to be paying attention to as we go on, as this continues to move off right now to the west-northwest. So the question is when does it pull up to that northwest turn? Expecting it maybe tonight around 2 a.m. according to the National Hurricane Center. That will play a big factor on where it goes. The more it keeps off to the west, the more of the western cone will be dealing with it, and more of possible of the Florida Panhandle. So something to be paying attention to right now. But this is the forecast cone here. I want to take a look at the radar really quickly, because the radar, we're already starting to see some outer bands coming into southern Florida, into the Miami area, and just really southern Florida right now. So taking a look here at the radar right now, this is the radar right here. Your storms obviously down to the south here. We have a little bit of those weather continuing on. This one going to be making its approach. Really, that one's not too big of a part of the storm, but these ones are a part of the storm. So the Keys definitely could start feeling some possible gusty winds and strong winds tonight as we head into, heading into early tomorrow morning when that is right off of your coast. So a little bit to be paying attention to. What we're paying attention to is a very, very big possible situation here for flash flooding. Is it going to impact the Keys as much? Probably not as much as you might think. Even though the center is going just to your west, it ain't going to be strong enough for you to get impacted too much. The question is who gets impacted here in the Gulf the worst. So we'll have to keep an eye out on that as well. But already some storms already starting to head into southern Florida. But taking a look here at the forecast cone, obviously we can see 30 miles an hour, hopefully, maybe a tropical depression could form at around 2 a.m. here. That will give us a little bit more of an idea on where the storm definitely could go here. 35 miles an hour when it's just below the Keys. Then we head into around August 4th here. So Sunday morning at around 2 a.m. here, we have a little bit more of a situation. The storm surge will start to probably pick up just a little bit down here in the southwestern Florida, as there's already tropical storm warnings there. I wouldn't be surprised if we start to see a little bit more tropical storm warnings issued at the 11 p.m. advisory. We'll have to keep an eye out on that as well. Then we go over here to where it's just west of Tampa Bay, 50-mile-an-hour tropical storm here moving off to the north-northeast. So it all depends here on where and when that turn happens. So something to be paying attention to. So right now, if we're taking a look here at the warnings and watches, we can clearly see there's a little bit of a change here at the 5 p.m. advisory. Now we're starting to see some storm surge watches out right now. Tropical storm watches are continuing on for the west coast of Florida here. Tropical storm warnings continuing on for Cape Coral all the way down here to the South Florida. The Keys still under a tropical storm watch as well. Could we see a big change here? I'm anticipating we'll probably see a little bit more of the tropical storm warnings start to move up at 11 p.m. and then maybe after 11 p.m. we could be seeing a 2 a.m. or 5 a.m. advisory where tropical storm warnings are starting to be issued over here near the Big Bend area. So a little bit to be paying attention to, but now we do have storm surge watches out right now. That is because when this storm is all the way over here, we're going to see a lot of those winds bringing in a lot of water, especially if you live in the Tampa Bay. Definitely want to keep an eye out on that very closely due to the possibility of 2 to 4 feet of storm surge. So if we take a look here a little bit at the National Hurricane Center cone here, we can clearly see still actually just south of Cuba right now. So just a little bit south of Cuba. So a little bit more of it could possibly get in a little bit stronger. The pressure did drop by 2 millibars, so that shows a little bit of a stronger system than we have been seeing all day. But once again, anticipating it to possibly hug the west coast. Some of the models are now pushing it off to the west here. We're going to have to take a look and see if the 00Z models have come out, the fresh new models. That would really depend. That would really show where the next National Hurricane Center cone could possibly be. So a little bit to be paying attention to as we go on. Obviously, we're expecting that curve, but the question is when do we expect that curve? Once again, so looking at the storm surge map here, once it gets past over here where it's not as strong, 1 to 3 feet still. So even though the storm might be up here, we're still seeing a little bit of that storm surge continuing on right over here for the southwestern part of Florida. Maybe for a little bit for the Keys as well, but the National Hurricane Center is not saying for the Keys, so that's at least good news for you. But Bonita Beach all the way over here to Suwannee River, we could see 2 to 4 feet of storm surge possible above ground level here. So a little bit to be paying attention to, so make sure you're keeping an eye out on this, because if the storm gets stronger, we could be seeing a little bit more kind of in this region right here, a little bit more of a possible stronger and more high up, you know, some storm surge. So a little bit to be paying attention to, but also there is a new moon, so that's going to be a little bit high tide as well added on to the 2 to 4 feet of storm surge. So a little bit to be paying attention to with the storm surge as well. Then with the rainfall threat, a little bit more of rainfalls over here by the Carolinas. That will be covered in another video because we're not paying attention to that as very much right now. Let's get Florida out of the way here, and we'll keep an eye out on that. But then west coast of Florida right here, we can clearly see probably we'll get the most amount of rain here, possibly stretching through the Tampa Bay, going over here, right kind of where the 2 to 4 feet storm surge area is right here, possibly 8 to 12 inches of rain during this storm. So a little bit to be paying attention to definitely over the next couple of hours. And could we see any updates here with the tropics and the tropical models? Taking a look here at the GFS model, this is a model that we've obviously been paying attention to in every video here. There's our storm right down here. We're keeping an eye out on that. This could possibly just push up here, but now it's bringing it up more into the Florida Panhandle. Still kind of bending over here, but not as much as it was when it was down over here in southern Florida and kind of going through the Tampa Bay area earlier in the earlier runs here. But it stays a little bit more off to the west, and then we'll continue to most likely just agree with the other models here. So something to be paying attention to definitely as we're continuing to see a more of a trend here into the Big Bend area. The question obviously is how far west does it go away from the west coast of Florida, because the more west it goes, the more stronger it possibly could become due to the Gulf of Mexico having some extremely hot waters. Really is not going to be a, you know, I mean, we could still be seeing some pretty good intensification if it stays off the west coast of Florida and doesn't hug the west coast of Florida. A little bit to be paying attention to, obviously. So please be making sure you're staying tuned with that, because some of the GFS and some of these other models, you know, are saying possible high-end tropical storm. So a little bit to be paying attention to, definitely. So this is the Euro model, the earlier run here, the 12Z. We can clearly see kind of bringing it off to the west coast of Florida as well, a little bit farther out into the Gulf, keeping it a little bit more of a weaker system here, but definitely not moving as quick, I would say, here. But there it is, dumping heavy amounts of rain over here on the west coast of Florida. Definitely could be dropping lots of rain, and then kind of stalls out over here by Georgia and South Carolina, and that could dump heavy amounts of rain by the Carolinas, and we'll talk about that once again in another video as well. So if we take a look here at the total accumulation according to the European model, we're anticipating very, very big rainfall possible on the west coast of Florida here. Definitely because it might slow down according to the European model out here in the right before making landfall in Florida. That could definitely bring a lot of rain. I know we have the 18Z starting to come out, so we'll definitely take a look at that for the forecast for the rain. So a little bit to be paying attention to as well. If we head into the GFS though, a little bit more of a different scenario here. Right now we can see obviously more of that rain will be off the coast of the Carolinas, and will continue to stay off of the coast. So that's at least good news. But still, the rain most likely will be out in the Gulf of Mexico, the most heaviest part of it. So a little bit to be paying attention to, obviously, with the rainfall threat here, because we have different scenarios from each models. Taking a look here at the HWRF model. This is one of the hurricane models. Keeping an eye out on it right now. So in the next 24 hours, this is what we're expecting the storm right now over the HWRF is expecting it most likely just a little bit northwest of the Keys here, and you can already see those bands will start to come in tomorrow afternoon here in southern Florida. Then we continue to watch it very closely here going into 2 a.m. So this could be an overnight storm a little bit according to the HWRF right here for the west coast of Florida. So that could be including just south of Sarasota all the way down over here. We could be keeping an eye out on this, because this could be some pretty big storms that head in, possible tornado threat here. Question is, will the Storm Prediction Center issue a tornado watch? We'll have to keep an eye out on that. But 36 hours out, this could be an overnight storm with this area, and then we go out to 5 a.m. early morning here the Tampa Bay starts to get some of that storm right there. This is according to the H-Wharf. These storms will continue to push up. These are bringing heavy thunderstorms and possible some big gusty winds with it. Definitely a tropical storm force winds. And then the H-Wharf, if the H-Wharf is right, we could be seeing a little bit more of an interesting situation when it comes to the Tampa Bay area, because we could be seeing a lot of storm surge definitely possible come in to the bay, or from the bay. So want to keep an eye out obviously on that. A little bit outer bands coming over here into south central Florida as well. Want to keep an eye out on that, but this will be obviously the worst part of the storm here. So if the H-Wharf was right, and this is the most recent run here, if the H-Wharf was right, it'd bring majority of that wind over here into the Tampa Bay area. The storms start to dissipate out throughout the rest of the day there, and then the rain kind of will still continue on, but does make that push over here into northern Florida of the northern bend. But the question obviously is how close does it get to the Tampa Bay area or even the West Coast? Because, you know, according to the H-Wharf, Tampa Bay could be really seeing some very, very strong storms here. Something to be paying attention to very closely. But, I mean, not just the Tampa Bay, but some pretty big storms down here as well in southern Florida. So, a little bit to be keeping an eye out on. Then we have Crystal River that needs to be paying an eye out on this. Cedar Key as well. A little bit to be paying attention to on this. And then we head over here to the HMON model here. A little bit more of a different type of scenario here. Heading into 24 hours out. This storm keeps it a little bit slower. It's off to the south here of the Keys. Right there, we can clearly see that. Then pushes it up 39 hours out. This is bringing it a little bit. This is bringing it actually much slower than the H-Wharf here. 5 a.m. the same day that the H-Wharf was. H-Wharf is right up here at 5 a.m. So something to be paying attention to. These storms obviously will start to move inland. Outer bands, this is when the storm surge will start down here, possibly around 5 a.m. August 4th. This is according to the HMON model. Then we take a look here. It goes a little bit more inland here. This will be around 2 p.m. on August 4th. Outer bands really going to be pretty strong here as those approach in these areas. And then this will be the big eye wall right here that could possibly have those big, strong, gusty winds. And as this approaches the big Florida bend, we could clearly see these outer storms still continuing on over here in central Florida. But the worst of it starts to go into northern Florida. So a little bit to be paying attention to as we go on throughout really just the next couple of hours. So continuing to pay attention to the severe weather threat, as we are paying attention to it as well for the severe weather threat side and the tropical weather threat. Can the gusty winds really hug the West Coast, or will we see a little bit more off to the west here? Everyone on the West Coast should be really paying attention to this, and we'll hopefully see a little bit more of a idea here on the National Hurricane Center by the 11 p.m. advisory and the 5 a.m. advisory, because storms are starting to show up tomorrow morning. So make sure to stay tuned in. Follow my X pages down in the description for more frequent updates, but make sure you leave a like and subscribe, and I hope to see you guys in the next video or live stream, and have a great night, and bye-bye.